Hello Mirror Dwellers, and welcome to my all-in-one tutorial for using Inventory Inventor. If you want to jump to a particular topic, please refer to the timestamps in the description below. This tutorial will cover the basics of using Inventory Inventor, and will explain what you'll need to know when creating your first inventory with it. We will first cover the basics of creating and navigating a preset, as well as what is possible with it. We will then discuss in depth on how to use pages, toggles, buttons, subpages, controls, and groups. Lastly, we will cover how to use, change, or remove presets from avatars. We will be using Inventory Inventor version 1.2.1 for this tutorial, so features in future versions will not be discussed here and instead will likely be relegated to their own separate videos that I will link in the description below. With all that out of the way, let us begin. To use Inventory Inventor, you need to know how to make and use presets. A preset contains all the information on a configured inventory. It contains information needed to create the menus, the controls, the animations, and all the animator layers that are required to actually have an inventory work on your avatar. To create a preset, right-click in the project browser, go to Create, Inventory Inventor, and then click on Preset. It'll then want you to put in the name. I'm just going to call this Preset. And then once you've done it, you will see in the inspector, you'll see the currently selected avatar, 2 bars indicating the amount of data and memory used, and the page directory. Okay, so what is data and memory? Data is the number of unique values needed in an integer expression parameter to run the inventory. I realize that's complicated, so let me break that down a bit. So if you've made a 3.0 avatar before, you'll know that the way you sync data with other players is by using expression parameters, whether they be ones built into the game like the ones for doing your left-hand gestures or your right-hand gestures, or ones that we can just define ourselves. There are currently 3 kinds of sync parameters you can make. There are booleans, which represent true or false, floats, which are decimals that range from -1 to 1, and integers that are whole numbers ranging from 0 to 255. Inventory Inventor primarily uses a single integer to sync the inventory with other players, meaning that if your inventory, or rather your preset, requires more than 255 numbers to turn into an inventory, it's unable to be synced with other players and it's not going to look right. As for what actually takes up data, we'll discuss that when we get to toggles. As for memory, it's kind of like data, but in a different way. Memory refers to the amount of synced bits that the inventory will use to save the state of toggles between worlds. So say your shirt starts on, you turn off the shirt, you go to a different world, the shirt will still be off. The way this works is, as we discussed a moment ago, one of the types of sync parameters you can create are booleans. Inventory Inventor allows you to create, or to choose whether or not a toggle preserves its state between worlds, and it uses a synced boolean to store the state for each item. Each boolean parameter takes 1 bit, and VRChat allows you to use up to 128 bits total across all of your expression parameters, meaning that there is a limit to how many you can actually keep the state of between worlds in your inventory. The amount that you can actually use depends on what other expression parameters you have. The bar will let you know if you exceed the available bits on the avatar, and also if you exceed the maximum amount of bits possible at all. You'll likely not have to worry about either of these limits though, since it takes a lot of items to actually have it become a problem. With memory though, if you have a older 3.0 avatar and are just starting to use it again, go check your expression parameters list, because if it was an old expression parameters object, there may be a bunch of blank expression parameter slots that are there that are just taking up space, and even though they're not used, they do count. So you have to go ahead and just remove each of those, otherwise you'll have problems when applying the preset later. Let's now go ahead and talk about pages and the directory. The directory contains all the pages within a preset and the items that they contain. To make things easy, just imagine a page being the same as an expressions menu. Each one can contain up to 8 items, such as toggles, buttons, subpages, and controls, and you can have as many pages as you want. Every page can be given both a name and an icon by clicking on them and then changing the fields here. So if I wanted to call this inventory main page, I could do it like that. And if I wanted to give it an icon, I could by just clicking on, oh, here it is, this like drop down one. You can create pages by clicking on the Create Page button, or by clicking this plus button to the right of it and choosing either to import an external expressions menu or append pages from other presets. If you choose to import an external menu, you can choose a expressions menu. I will use mouth control as an example. And then if you hit, you're also able to choose whether or not it imports submenus that it finds within that menu. All menus that it imports will be separate pages. So if I go ahead and hit import, you'll see it import 3 pages: mouth control, special, and regular. Each of these will contain their controls, how they were initially set up on the other one. We'll talk about controls later, briefly, when we get to it. And if you choose to hit append another preset instead, you can choose a different preset. I'll use tutorial as an example. And then you can choose whatever pages you want to add from it. So if I choose like this one, and this one, and hit append, it'll add all the pages from those, all the items that were in them, and yeah. You can reorder pages by grabbing the handle to the left of them and then just dragging them around. Whichever page is the first in the list will become the default page. The default page is the page that the inventory starts in when you open it in game. So wherever you put this on your model's current menus, this one will be the one that it opens up to. So it will always be the first one in the list. It's good practice to use this first page as one for just getting to other pages in the preset, if you have more than one. We'll discuss how you can do this later with subpage items. If you want to remove a page, you just click it and then click remove, and that's how you remove them. If you accidentally remove a page by accident that you didn't want to delete, you can use Control-Z to bring it back. A lot of the program has Control-Z functionality, so more often than not, you'll be able to use it. There are certain cases where you can't, but in those cases, it's usually very clear whether or not you can undo it or not. And then finally, I already done this a few times, but if you click the arrow to the left of the name, it will open it up and you can see the items inside. Let's quickly discuss how items are created, ordered, and moved before we talk about how you actually use them. To create items, just click the Create Item button on the page that you want to put the item to be created in. If you want to remove them, just select them and remove them, just like pages. But do keep in mind that you can only have up to 8 per page. So if you hit the limit, it will just not, the button will be grayed out and you cannot create any more in that page. To reorder items within a page, I guess I shouldn't have deleted them all yet. Just like with pages, you can drag the handle to the left of the name. To move items between pages, all you have to do is right-click on an item, hover over Send to Page, and then choose the page you want to send it to. There is 2 slot ones here now, but trust me, one of them is the one we just sent over because it had the same name. I'll just send it back. For example's sake, I'll also send over slot 2. See, there we go. Keep in mind that if a page is full, it will not show up in the menu when you right-click to send it, and you won't be able to move it there. Let's now discuss the types of items that you can use in the inventory. There are 4 types of items: toggles, buttons, subpages, and controls. In a directory, the type of item can be seen to the right of its name. I've went ahead here and made one of each, so we can go through them in order. Each type of item has its own purpose, and you will likely end up using all of them at some point or another. Toggles are the main item type that you will most use. They're used for toggling items or animations on an avatar. A toggle can be given both a name and an icon, just like a page, and they have a lot of settings for, well, toggling things. So the first thing that you can control is whether or not it affects a game object or it plays animations when it's used. If you choose a game object, you can choose any object in under your avatar's root. So like if I put my shirt in here, it'll toggle on and off my shirt when I use this in game. It's important to note that if something is not part of your avatar, So say like the directional light, you can't even put it in because it's not there. Now, if you have something in here and it's not on the avatar, you will get a notice below the data and memory portion bars up here that tell you what the missing items are and where they should be on the avatar but are not found. Therefore, this area is avatar dependent. So if you do not have any avatars active in the scene, so if I go ahead and just turn this off, switch over back to the preset, firstly, it tells you that there's no avatars here. And then secondly, if you go here, it tells you you have to have an avatar to switch which object it affects. And instead of giving you an area to put in an object, it'll tell you the path it currently has stored to an object, which in this case is just my shirt because it's directly at the root. If you choose to use animation clips, it will play a different animation depending on if it's toggled or disabled. If you leave either of these empty, it will just be its default state. So therefore, if you just have an animation for turning something on that starts off here, you can just put it under enabled and leave nothing under disabled, and it should work fine. There's some cases where that's not how it works. Your mileage will vary. In addition, you're able to choose whether or not the toggle starts enabled or disabled by default. There's not much more to say here. And then lastly, you have control over how the toggle is synced. So there are 3 different ways that items or toggles can be synced. There is off, which is local only. Only you will see the item change. No one else will ever see it change. Manual, which works kind of like how inventories were synced in 2.0. So everyone that's in the world with you currently can see the item change, but if someone joins in late, they will see it how it is by default. It's important to note that different than AV2 syncing, though, if you change it again, they will see it in the correct state now. So say that you turn something off and then someone joins and sees it on. If you then turn it on for yourself, they'll still see it on, and then if you turn it off again, they'll then see it turn off. And then finally, we have auto, which is how Inventory Inventor chooses to sync. How this works is, without going into too much detail, is essentially it goes through a loop of syncing each item one by one very quickly. And so anyone who joins in late will sooner rather than later see it update to be what it currently is in. So everyone will see you in the correct state. In addition, when you have auto selected, you're able to choose whether or not the state of the item is saved between worlds. So if you don't have this enabled, if you have this disabled, if your item starts off and you have it on and then switch to a different world, it will be off again. But if you have this, if you have saved on or enabled, then if you change something from being off to on and then go to a different world, it will still be on, even if the default is off. In terms of data, this is where data is actually consumed, or one of the areas actually. So toggles by default, if I go ahead and click this, toggles, if sync is turned off, they use one unit of data. If they're set to manual, they use 3 units. If they're set to auto, they also use 3 units. However, if you have the item saved and set to auto, it will actually use 1 instead. Groups also affect this, which we'll talk about very shortly. But for the most part, toggles can take anywhere between 1 and 5 units of data. So now let's talk about groups. Groups are a way for you to use one toggle and affect several other toggles. So if I go ahead and create like 2 more here to use as examples. Toggles have access to 2 different groups. They have an enabled group and a disabled group. Basically, how this works is whenever this toggle is enabled or disabled, these groups will trigger once when it switches. This doesn't run constantly. And for every item in the group, you can choose whether or not it gets disabled or enabled when this toggle is switched. You're not able to toggle whatever that current item's state is because it's just a little too convoluted to both implement in the preset and also to wrap your head around mentally. When trying to use it in game, you will probably make a mistake and perhaps show something weren't meaning to show. So as of right now, you're only able to set things to either be always disable or always enable when the toggle is fired. You can add as many members to the group as you have different toggles in the inventory, excluding the one you currently have selected. So as you can see here, I can't choose slot 6 because it's already in the group. So you can't have it in here twice and then go like enable and disable. That doesn't work. In various syncing modes, groups will also take up some data, specifically when you have it set to off or auto. If you have it set to off, it will take an additional one for each of the groups that you're using. So if you're only using the enable group, it will only add 1. If you're using both, it will add 2. Same with auto. Now let's move on to buttons. So buttons are actually very similar to groups, as in it is a group, except it's just a group. So you can use this to set like the state of an inventory. So say you have like an outfit that has multiple parts that you can individually control. You can use this to set all those parts to how they should be at once. It's basically a group, but as its own item, and doesn't have a toggleable state. It's always, if you click it, it will always do this. Buttons will always use 1 unit of data, and they can also be given a name and an icon just like everything else. Now let's move on to subpages. This one is pretty easy. For this though, I will need another page. So subpages are just like submenus. They allow you to access other menus in the inventory. If you click one, its name will be assigned here. But you can also change this to be something custom if you want. So if you don't want it to be the name of the page, you can just have it be whatever you want. If you notice you're not able to set an icon here, that's because the icon for the page is used instead. So whatever icon you set here for the page will be the one used on this item. And the last item type we have to cover is controls, and this one is pretty simple. Controls are quite literally just the controls from an expressions menu. So you have all your stuff here: button, control, button, toggle, submenu, 2-axis puppet, 4-axis puppet, radial puppet. They're all here, and it works exactly the same way as you would on a normal expressions menu. If you want tutorials on how these work, there are other ones online to look at, and also some part of VRChat's own documentation. So I recommend you go look at those there, because I'm not going to. As we discussed a little bit though, I mentioned when you imported external menus that everything would be imported as controls, how they were set up. There is a slight exception to that. If you choose to import submenus and it has submenus to import, those submenus will instead be set as subpages. Since the menu hasn't been created yet, you can't just assign it here. So it'll instead use a subpage that leads to this. If you choose not to, it will keep the submenu control instead, and that's how that works, basically. So that's basically everything you need to know in order to create your own preset. Use toggles for changing the state of items or playing animations. Use buttons to set up like configurations like outfits and stuff to affect multiple things in the inventory all at once. Use subpages for navigating around the inventory. Use controls for, well, whatever stuff you want to include. And then that's basically it. For an example, I'm going to use my own inventory that I have set up for this avatar, and I'm going to walk through how all of it works in there. And after that, I will show you how to apply, remove, and change what inventory is currently on the avatar. So let's get started. So as you can see, I have 5 pages in my inventory. I have one for navigating to my different menus of clothing. I have one for selecting different parts of clothing to toggle on and off. I have one for different sets. So when I have all of them on, only the inner clothes and then the underwear. And then I have some options here, such as like having longer sleeves for this, shorter sleeves for them going in. I have one for hiding the hood and then hiding the headphones. And then I have some other stuff here like a blush and then one for my glasses. So let's go through them one by one. So in my clothes page, it has 3 subpage items in it, one that goes to each one. So one that goes to the select page, the options page, and the sets page. If we go ahead and head over to select, I have my 4 toggles here. All of these are using animation clips, specifically because I need to affect more than just a game object in mind. So what I do in my scenario is, if you may notice here, I do have bra and panties here separately. However, if I keep them on when the other clothing is on, they're going to clip. So what I do is I disable the mesh renderer on the panties and bra whenever these are on. And then I re-enable the mesh renderer whenever I turn them off. And so that's why these have that. There is an example of me using the game object later with the headphones, and I'll show that when we get there. So tops refers to this outer like cloak thing. It starts enabled, obviously, and then when it's disabled, an animation will play to turn this off. I will show an example of that in a moment after we apply it. Syncing is set to on and it is saved. Or set to auto and it's saved. There are no groups on this. On my shirt, it's set up the exact same way, and also has no groups. Pants is the same way as well, and then so is the shoes. So let's move on to sets. So you can see I have 3 buttons here. I have fully clothed, inner clothing, and only underwear. So these are very simple. Fully clothed turns on all of them here. Inner clothing disables the top and the shoes, so I'll just have only the shirt and the pants. Only underwear disables all 4, so I'll be left in the panties and bra. If I go down to the options, we have long sleeves and short sleeves. These are actually blend shapes, so if you want to toggle blend shapes with this, you can. You just need to have animations that change those blend shapes. My sleeves are not long by default, so the animation is on enabled instead, and so when I turn it on, the sleeves get longer. For short sleeves, it's the opposite. I want them short by default, which is like this. So it starts enabled, and then when I disable, it goes away, and it actually goes to here because then I just don't have sleeves. For hide hood, this one is simple. It just triggers a blend shape that hides the hood. For hide headphones, this is the one that uses the game object. This one is obviously starts on, but since headphones is its own object, I can have it in here and it will just turn off whenever I click it and turn back on when I click it again. Other is some other stuff. So this is just more blend shapes with the blushes. And then the glasses is the same thing, more blend shapes and animations. Yours doesn't have to be as convoluted as this. If you don't want to mess with the mesh renderer stuff, you can just use the game object and throw all these in and call it good. That will work. It's just in my particular case, I had to make animations that also affected the mesh renderer. Otherwise, I'd have clipping issues. In order to show you the preset in action, I first need to show you how to add it to the avatar. So to add presets to an avatar, click on Tools up here, go to Avatars 3.0, go to Inventory, Inventor, and then click Manage Inventory. This will bring up this menu here, which you can now see. And in here, you have 2 tabs, Create and Remove. We're obviously going to be creating an inventory on an avatar right now. You want to choose the avatar to effect, or well, whatever the active avatar is. You want to choose what menu it adds to. By default, it'll use whatever your expressions menu you have set in the avatar descriptor is. And then the FX controller to put everything on, which will also pick whatever FX one you have in there currently. If you don't want it to put it on the FX animator you're currently using, you can just set this to none, and then it'll just generate its own one. You can do that. Same with the menu, but I'm going to leave it set up like this because this is how I want to set it up. Next, you choose the preset you want to apply. I'm going to go ahead and choose the preset we created. Or no, sorry, I'm going to choose the preset that I have set up. So inventory. Refresh rate. Let me talk about this for a moment. So you may remember earlier when I described how auto worked, it uses a loop to sync all the items that aren't saved in order. This is how long it takes between each item for syncing. You almost always want to leave this on 0.05 because any faster will likely result in people not seeing it update in time because of latency and ping, and then missing it when it switches. So it'll just be skipping items for them. And although it's statistically improbable, there's a chance they will never see it change while they're in the instance. Next, you get to choose the destination folder that it uses. If you just click this, it'll bring it up, and then you can choose. I'm going to go ahead and just put it in our folder here. I'm going to go ahead and just make a folder for it. Inventory, and then select that. I'll go ahead and update it here. If the name is too long, it'll abbreviate the beginning and make sure you see the end of it. And then you can choose whether or not to overwrite existing files if needed in the folder. It's not going to matter here since we're just adding it, but I'll hit yes anyway. And then all you have to do is hit create. It'll do it, tell you it's done, and then it'll focus on the default pages menu that it made. So here you can see it created the menu with the 3 subpage controls that we saw, the one that goes to select, options, and sets, and it also used the icons that we put in. Apparently one of my icons was missing from the pack. It does not matter though. It'll still work. And quickly, just to show it, since I haven't yet, if you want to remove an inventory, this is what it looks like. You choose the controller to remove the inventory from, and then in the preview, it'll show you what layers it will remove. If you choose to remove parameters, it'll also remove parameters from the controller, not the expression parameters list. If you want to remove the ones from the expression parameters list as well, you hit the yes button under this option. The ones that are also expression parameters and will be removed will be highlighted in purple. I'm not going to because I don't need to remove the expression parameters. And if you hit remove, it'll tell you it's unreversible, and then it'll do it. I'll go ahead and just re-add it since now I have to. And then now, if you look on my main menu, you can see that it is in here now, right here. So the menu it created, avatar close, is now in here with the icon shirt that the default page had and the name close, which the default page had as its name. At that point, you're done with the manager. You can close it, and it should technically now all be set up. So for example's sake, I have no idea if this emulator is going to work correctly this time, but I'm going to try it. For it to work, you have to put the animator in the side view, is what I've discovered, so that's what I usually do. And then if I click on this, I can see my menu hierarchy. If I go into close and then go into select, I choose tops, it removes my top. I choose shirt, removes the shirt. Choose, pants. If I go to options, I can then do the, well, okay, the jacket isn't available, so you can't see the sleeves one or the hood. But I can turn on and off the headphones. Let me go ahead and show you the sleeves. So I hit it earlier, so it's still on long sleeves. If I then choose short sleeves, it goes short, long, none. And then hide the hood. And there, you have a cutie here. And that's how it works. I'll quickly now go over what layers it creates in the animator itself, because that could be good to know. So this is not the inventory. This is where the inventory starts. I'll leave a timestamp below. You can jump to the next timestamp if you don't care about this. This is more for the people who are interested. So this is the main loop of how it loops through the inventory. I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit more because even I am struggling to read that. It starts out on an idle state, which will trap any remote clients in here, since you don't want the remote clients going through the loop because of client-side prediction, which apparently exists. I have no idea why VRChat doesn't document this. And then here you have all the states for whether you've pressed a button or you've toggled a different, or you've toggled one of the options. When you toggle an option, it sends a unique number out that affects all these layers and makes it so that they all flip. Each item layer is very similar and looks like itself. There's an idle state it starts out in. This state by default has the animation that is set as the default state of the toggle, and then it will immediately jump to on or off whether or not it's enabled or disabled due to whether it's saved or not. This is just the best way I found out how to do it. The any state block contains all the transitions containing all the numbers that should set it to off or on. And these could be the toggle itself, various buttons, any groups that contain the item, things like that. And then there's also in every single one of these layers a machine identifier transition. This is a fake transition. It doesn't actually lead anywhere or go from anywhere. And it is specifically used to identify which layers are of the inventory for deletion and for overwriting and stuff. These should never be deleted. If they are deleted, it will not detect the layer and you'll have to delete it yourself. But that's basically how they all are set up. And with that, let me get back to the actual main tutorial. So, I've shown you how to apply and remove a preset. I have not shown you how to overwrite one. So, if you want to change an inventory that is currently on an avatar, all you have to do is just reapply the modified preset on it. It will overwrite any inventory currently existing on it, which means if you have an inventory, if you have two inventories and you want to put them on the same avatar, you can't, as with separate presets. But if you append all the pages from one preset into the other one, you can then have the one preset with all the pages together that you can then put on here. So can you have two separate inventories with two separate trackers? No. But you can have one preset that consists of all the pages of two inventories, if that makes sense. The final thing I'll talk about now, since we're basically done with everything, is just this last feature I have in here, the check for updates. So Inventory Inventor includes a update checker. It will, whenever you start Unity, it will look online to see if there's a new update. If there is, it'll notify you and ask if you want to install it. It's very recommended that you do, as every time that this gets updated, it's usually either new features are added or important bugs are fixed. Additionally, you can click the check for updates button like I just have, but more often than not, that's going to tell you you're using the latest version, unless if you started Unity like 5 days ago, I updated it, and then you didn't restart Unity, so you're not going to get the update notification. That's basically it for the tutorial. There isn't much else to mention. Everyone's experience with it is going to be different. Some avatars are going to work with the same configuration. Other ones are going to need slight changes. VRChat is a beast, and we all know that if you do the same thing twice, you're not going to get the same result. If you have issues, experiment a bit, see if you can get it working. If you really can't get it working and you need help, feel free to ask your question in the comments below. Send me a message on Discord, or just leave an issue on GitHub if you find a bug or something like that. And with that, thank you for watching. I have no idea how long this is going to be since I recorded it in several parts, but hopefully this was informative and will at least be of some use to those of you wanting to learn and figure out how to make all this stuff work. Adding this in post because I realized there was something I didn't say at the end. By now, you might have realized that with all that this tool allows you to control, you can do more than just show and hide objects, toggle dances, you know. With it, you can really set up like your avatar's entire menu structure if you wanted. You could create like a preset that had like template pages that you could put onto all your avatars, like say one for control, using the default emotes VRChat provides, and you know, just more stuff like that. There really is a lot that you can do with this, and I'm really excited to see what you all decide to do with it. That's all I wanted to say, and again, thank you all for watching. Good luck using the tool, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.